now that we have seen several examples, let's now look at function deeper. So generally, a function has these parts. So we have the function declaration. Actually, you have not seen this yet, but I will explain later what a function declaration is. We also have the function definition, the function call, and lastly, we have the return statement. All right, so we will start with a function declaration. So when I ask about a function declaration, what can you think of? So you know that before you can use a certain variable, you have to declare it first, right? So for example, you want to use a variable in average, and you declare it with a type double. So what it does is you are informing the compiler that that certain variable will have um, values will have values with decimal points, right? So it's the same when you are declaring functions. So in declaring functions, you also have your data type, right? So what it does is you are informing your compiler that a certain function will return a double, or a certain function will return an int, or that certain function will have to receive double na arguments, or that function will receive integer na arguments. Okay, so you are letting your compiler know what the properties of that certain function. Okay, so we will explain that more in the next slides. So in our previous programs, the definition of each function was always placed above the point at which it was called. So in our previous example, we only had two functions. We had the main and the user function defined that we have added. Okay, and that those user defined functions that we have discussed are always placed above the main. However, in C, actually, you don't, uh, uh, C does not require that the definition of a function precede its calls. Okay, so suppose that we rearrange, let's say we rearranged average the C program that we have defined before by putting the definition of compute average after the definition of main. So as you can see here, we have the main function where we ask the user to enter three numbers, and we call the compute average na function, uh, enclosing in parentheses the arguments that we supply to the compute average, and then we put the compute average na function definition under the main. Okay, so what happens is that there will be an error. So as you can see in the expected output below, so it shows that it shows a warning. So the warning wherein there is an implicit na declaration of function compute average. Okay, so and then here there's a conflicting types of compute na average. Okay, so what happens is that when the compiler encounters the first call of compute average in main, it does not have any information about compute average. So ito tinawag niya na lang yung compute average, but it does not have any information about compute average at all. Does it return double, or does it accept double na values? Does it accept the integers? Okay, so when it encounters the definition of main, so once it has called the compute average, and now you are here on the definition of compute average later in the program, it notices that the compute average function is actually return type is actually a double, and also the types of arguments A and B are also double and not an integer. So that's why that we are getting an error message, an implicit na declaration. Okay, so a solution is that we can provide the compiler a glimpse or a brief na glimpse at a function whose full definition will appear later. So in other words, provide a declaration and then later define what the function will do. So as you can see here, this is the formal na syntax. So this resembles the first line of a function definition, but ends with a semicolon at the end. So here's the general na syntax. So you have the return type. So the return type could either be void or double or int, etc. And then you have the name of the function, and then enclosed in the parentheses are the parameters of that function. Okay, so here's an example. So instead of putting the function definition above the main, we are putting it below the main. All right. However, we provide a function declaration above the main, wherein this resembles this first line of the function definition. So here we let the compiler know that we have a compute average function with returning a type double and having two parameters with type double also. Okay. However, this is this instead of braces, you have to end it with a semicolon. So also, you don't need to specify the names of the function parameters as long as their types are present. So in here previously, we have an exact na copy of the first line of the function definition and specifying the name of the variables. But in function declaration, you don't have to specify the names of the function parameters as long as their types are present. However, it's usually not best to omit parameter names and remind the programmer the order in which arguments must appear. Right. So the function declaration is required when you define a function in one source file and you call that function in another file. So in such case, you should declare the function at the top of the file that is calling the function.